Okay, the quorum and calling the meeting to order. I ask approval of the agenda. So moved by Josh, seconded by David. Any additions or deletions from the agenda? All in favor of approval of the agenda? Opposed, if any? None opposed. Thank you. Call for adoption of the minutes of the meeting of May 16th, 2024, as presented. Moved by David, seconded by? I'll second that.
I have an item.
You have an item on the minutes?
Yeah, what do I do? That's the... Oh, okay. For the attending record for the meeting, I thought it would be appropriate to add John Dam's name and Jim McLaren, since they spoke. It'd be a good way of referencing when you're checking through the minutes to. That's it.
That's a very good addition. Well done. Thank you.
Okay, everyone approve the change to the minutes?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, is there any public participation for this meeting? Hearing none, we'll move on.
You also have activity reports. I'm not sure if you have any right now, but as a line item on your agenda.
I'm sorry, my hearing's bad.
Oh, sorry, activity reports as a line item on the agenda. From members was the next one.
Oh, activity reports from members, okay. Any activity reports from members?
I have one for you.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, just an update to the Heritage Commission. Last month, I referenced the ongoing efforts from the city of Colwood to expand the community gardens into Royal Bay. Met with senior staff and at the Ideas Fair, met with Chief Mayor and Council members and advised them of some of the ongoing conversations with the manager of Parks and manager of ground maintenance at grounds and parks, and we drafted some concept drawings for a large allotment style garden, community garden space in the Royal Bay area. We also cited several other spaces and have the understanding that the developer Gablecraft will be involved in supporting the development of the gardens when they're done. I'm last told that negotiations for this for the proposed sites are still ongoing, and I have no confirmation to report at this time. But we had some good uptake at the Ideas Fair. Community members like the idea of a community allotment style gardens in their area, and we designed a space to accommodate between 50 and 70 allotment beds in the garden design that we put together. So that's just to share with the Heritage Commission. Hopefully to include some heritage trees and plants in the process too. So that's the relevance there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any other comments? Updates? Don?
Oh, I wanted to mention that I've published a book called Dunsmuir Ring. It's about James Dunsmuir Jr., who went off to join the First War and died on the Lusitania. So this book gives credit to Jenny Seaman as the main contributor of archival information, and it lists the staff that was at Dunsmuir for the Dunsmuir residence in 1915, and it also has, interestingly, a complete floor plan of the Hatley Castle. And it's available at Bolin Books and Monroe Books, and of course at Craig Derrick Castle Gift Shop. So I hope that you would enjoy seeing copies of it. Thank you. Or even buying copies, that's even better.
Thank you, Don. If I may then move. Recognize Marcy Lalande, Manager of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share a presentation. There we go. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to provide a brief little overview of the report that's attached to your agenda. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Marcy Lalande. I'm the Manager of Corporate Services, and I used to be a member of the Heritage Commission. So in 1993, the City of Colwood had taken over management of both St. John the Baptist Heritage Church, the cemetery, and Pioneer Cemetery. It was previously managed through the Colwood Women's Institute. In 1999, both of these properties were designated by bylaw as protected heritage properties within Colwood. And in 2022, staff have identified the need to review and do an inventory of the cemeteries. In 2022, Mr. Ron Aubrey approached the city to look at donating signage for Pioneer Cemetery. So under the cemetery management bylaw with the city, council has been established as the Board of Cemetery Trustees. So council has considered the creation of this cemetery management plan, and Mr. Aubrey's offer to provide the signage at their November 27th regular meeting of council. And I've included the motion here that council had made, and they directed that we return with a budget for the creation of a cemetery management plan for both Pioneer and St. John the Baptist Heritage Church Cemetery, and that council directs staff to work with Mr. Aubrey to explore the creation and installation of wooden signage at both Pioneer Cemetery and St. John Cemetery. I'm just providing this photo for those of you that maybe are not familiar with the site. This is just a photo of Pioneer Cemetery. St. John Cemetery is located just across the parking lot, and this is the cemetery there, and St. John's Church. This is a photo of the signage that Mr. Aubrey has created that he would like to be considered to be installed at the cemetery. This is just one of the signs. There are two entrances to Pioneer Cemetery. So it would be installed at both sites, and it's just a little further down where the other entrance is. So staff have worked with LeMay, Mr. Mark Chambers, who is a heritage consultant. He's actually in the meeting today for any of you that might have any questions. He has provided a scope for the cemetery management plan, and the plan will identify conditions, treatments, and maintenance for each of the sites. And he has also provided a list of additional recommended scopes, which includes geotechnical consulting, legal surveys, detailed records of the church, and key monuments. So the cemetery management plan will have required treatments, maintenance, landscape issues, donations, and priorities for the sites. And it's going to help to preserve and maintain the heritage values of the cemeteries. And this is just to give you a timeline. So we're here before the Heritage Commission to consider the report. We're hoping that a recommendation would come forward through the commission that would go to council on the 24th. If council decides to go forward, we would be looking at putting out a request for proposal for services to get the cemetery management plan done throughout the summer, and looking to select somebody to do that in the fall. And the goal is to have a completed plan by January of 2025. Within the report, we have recommendations. We've split them out, so we have a recommendation related to the plan and a recommendation related to the installation of the signage. So this is those recommendations here, and they're included within your report. And I've also provided some options in case the committee wanted to look at those. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions of staff regarding this?
My question, looking at the image of the proposed sign and the curved part that says Pioneer, is that, that's on the, pretty much on the ground level. Is that gate not used to access this cemetery?
Thank you. So that signage would be installed above those stone monuments that you saw. It was just there for visual, so council could see what it looked like. Mr. Aubrey did have some out to the site to show what he proposed to put up. And so it's down on the ground. It hasn't been installed yet. So it would be installed above on those two posts that were in that picture.
So I thought maybe that might be the case, but the two posts are at a different height. So schematically, would the curved sign be on a level with the ground, or is it proposed to be slanted, or is it this just a schematic image of the proposed sign?
I actually have John Russell, who is our Deputy Director of Public Works, that's available for questions, and I believe he knows exactly the details of the installation.
Thank you. Through the chair, I believe Mr. Aubrey's intent was that it be slanted, and that there are two gates, and the idea is that each of the gates would have a slanted arch, and the two would point towards each other and create visually at a distance one overall arch.
Thank you. Tom, you have something else?
Yeah.
That's it? Okay, David?
Here we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would point out, I was at the site then when we had a chance to take a look at it, when those pictures are taken. The vertical posts were to be installed in such a way as the stone gate pillars would remain where they are. And then as was mentioned, the cross piece carrying the name would be lifted up on a bit of an angle. And then from a maintenance perspective, the wood had been treated to maintain its age somehow, but that they are designed to age naturally and over time would gray somewhat as wood tends to. And the raised letters are a galvanized tin which resists corrosion. And it's kind of like, you can't see it in the photograph, but it's kind of like a little tin can with straight sides raised from the surface of the wood, and actually is quite effective. The galvanizing then would prevent the corrosion, but would maintain their gray color. They're designed to not necessarily be painted. So from a maintenance point of view, as Mr. Aubrey was explaining that day, it was designed to have as low a maintenance cost over time as possible. And that's what I heard. That's not, obviously, I don't think there's anything formalized there, but that's how I understand it. For your information, thanks.
Thank you, David. Any other comments? Yes. Now, who am I recognizing here?
Is it me?
Okay, Jenny, yes, please.
Okay. Okay, so my question is about the cemetery management plan. I don't see any reference in there to previous inventory work that's been done. I believe Bill Sylvester did some detailed work at listing all of the people that are buried in that cemetery. I just wanted to make sure that that's acknowledged so that that work isn't repeated unnecessarily.
Yes, that work was provided to the consultant, and again, just so you know, Mr. Chalmers is available online if you had any questions specific to it.
Thank you. Could that work be available to the committee as well?
Yes, we have actually a Pioneer Cemetery book as well as St. John's, and they're both made available on our city website. And they both were provided to the consultant for review.
Thank you. Any other comments, please?
I've got one. And it's a question, I see that we're being asked to endorse a sort of $115,000 financial request from the city. 75,000 is for the management plan, another 40,000 for associated activities, all of which seem great to me. I was just curious though, is this one time or is this ongoing? Is this 75,000 a year plus 40,000 of one-time stuff, or how does that break down?
Thank you through the chair. Yes, that would be a one-time fee.
Okay. I see also that within the management plan, there's a bunch of sort of restoration, rehabilitation activities that could be contemplated and achieved. I guess my question is, you know, if that happens one time, then over time it degrades again. Is there a thought towards what might be a next step?
That might be a question for Mr. Chalmers. We don't have that detailed yet. I believe that would come out through the creation of this plan. But go ahead, Mark, if you'd like to comment.
Yes, thanks very much. Certainly, the first step for the consultant would be to gain a great understanding, a sufficient understanding of the condition of all the assets in the two cemeteries. And from that understanding, develop a series of strategies to rehabilitate. In some cases, if the deterioration is too great, to replace fabric. And in doing so would be to develop details that would be durable, long-lasting, but respectful of the heritage value of the two cemeteries. And certainly, if there is a detail that is prone to fail, the standards and guidelines that we use as a document to guide projects like this would be to not repeat a detail that is destined to fail, but to provide something that is sympathetic, but more robust in nature, so that there won't be, you can see some of the cemetery plots, the ledgers have cracked and subsided because the soil has subsided, and there's stresses in the concrete which can't resist that settlement. And so any replacement or rehabilitation of those elements would provide sufficient reinforcing, stabilize the soils, so there won't be these kinds of ongoing maintenance items. And certainly we want to respect the heritage value of the cemeteries, and St. John the Baptist Church respect the heritage value and the character defining elements, but make any interventions robust enough that they won't require excessive maintenance on a yearly basis. So if that answers your question, if not, I'm happy to expound further.
No, I think it does. I think, you know, I was just curious what happens after. It sounds to me like through the work you're going to do, you know, we'll get some treatments that help towards rehabilitating features and some sense of what might be needed to keep up maintenance going forward. So I think that's great. I fully support this. I mean, if Call is going to put real money towards conserving heritage, I'm always going to be supportive of that for sure. It's just my consideration is that, you know, if you do it once, that's great, but you know, it's a good idea to keep things up over time. So if your work can put some thought to that and give some recommendations to Colwood maybe about what an annual maintenance might look like, if it needs to be annual, I don't know if it does. These features, you know, cemeteries are made to last usually, but
Well, part of the cemetery management plan is a maintenance plan. And some
Okay.
items require just periodic review, just to see what condition they're in. Others will require maybe every 5 or 10 years, some level of intervention. But the biggest culprit and the biggest, I guess, risk that municipalities face is deferred maintenance.
Yeah.
If you don't do anything in 10, 20 years, it ends up becoming a really costly intervention. And then it becomes unsightly as well. And certainly through the management of the cemeteries, the city of Colwood wants to see these beautiful, visited, and really shine in the community. And the maintenance plan will provide those kinds of periodic inspections and reviews with periodic intervention as required.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have a question of staff. Is this an active cemetery?
Thank you through the chair. Not that active, but it is still being used. I know I have an interment actually next month, so it is at quite a bit of capacity, but there are full burial plots that remain within Pioneer Cemetery. And for each full plot, there is allowed up to 2 sets of cremated remains to be interred into each site. So it is still active, but not as active as most cemeteries.
Thank you. My next question is, I was there today and looked at it. I see a problem with trees. Everybody wants to save a tree, but unfortunately, quite often with markers, the trees disrupt the markers and the grave sites. So are we looking at removing trees from these cemeteries?
Thank you through the chair. Quite a bit of the trees that were put in there are Gary oaks. And some of them were put in through the Colwood Women's Institute. In addition, in that site, there is a lot of native plants and flowers, and there's even a plant in there that is on the endangered species list. So one of the rules that we had when we took it over from the Colwood Women's Institute was to ensure that all the wildflowers go to seed before there's any trimming or maintenance that is done in there to ensure that they keep coming back on an annual basis. And I do believe that some of the Gary oaks were maybe done for the coronation of, I believe it was for the king at the time. So and there might have been one that was put in there as well for when the Queen's coronation was done. So there are some heritage trees. I know they look quite small, but I think they've actually been there for quite a long time. They don't seem to grow that much.
Through the chair to the corporate services officer.
Thank you, Mark.
Just a clarification. So which king was it? And we're talking 1937 then for those plantings, and then Queen Elizabeth's 1950s coronation. Is that what I understand?
That's correct.
And if they are Gary oaks and they aren't gonna, they're indigenous plants to our ecosystem, and they are a slow growing, sustainable tree. And if they're not too big now, makes a lot of sense. They're not even 100 years old. So most of our heritage trees of that species are 200 to 300 to 400 years old in our area right now.
And another question. So Colwood is currently responsible for the maintenance of that site.
That's correct. I know I've been here for just over 30 years, so my timing is not always right, but I think about 10 years ago, we actually did put some maintenance into the cemetery. We did do some repairs on some of the headstones. a lot of the families are no longer around to provide maintenance to some of the sites. So we did put some money in that was provided through the Colwood Women's Institute to ensure that we did some maintenance.
Question through the chair.
Yes, thank you.
Just want to applaud the activities of the city of Colwood and their staff, and to the speaker's memories. It's really really impressive that they were able to honor the wishes of the Colwood Women's Institute and allowing the plants to have their natural cycle before any maintenance was done. And I know that in the work that I've seen around with Colwood and their current leadership in their parks department, that was something that is well respected in this area. So I applaud that group, and my hands are up to you for that effort. Thank you.
Jenny, do you have something?
It was just a point of clarification on the oak trees, the coronation trees. My understanding is that because they were celebrating the coronation of the king, and they happened throughout the Commonwealth, trees were planted in celebration. I do believe they were English oak trees, but I could be wrong. That's just my memory of the story.
Thank you. I in the past, I participated in conservation reports for other local cemeteries. And it's a difficult question. Do you want to preserve the grave markers or the trees? Quite often there's a conflict there. Moving on, anything, other comments? We have two recommendations in front of us. Would someone care to make a motion?
I'll move to support the recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to comment on the second part of the recommendation that the signage install be deferred, Mr. Aubrey's sign be deferred until it can be considered in the context of the cemetery management plan, and the sign is ready to be installed, as you can see from the photograph. And I know Mr. Aubrey is anxious to get it done, and I wasn't sure if that part of the recommendation needed to be included. That would defer for some time. I don't know how long we'd be waiting for the plan, because then the sign would have to happen, install would happen after that. I guess that means that I personally think that the sign could be installed and should go ahead, given the context of Mr. Aubrey's efforts here and the fact that he's donating this, unless there's objection in some way to it.
So I guess the real question is, do we want to separate these items and concerning Mr. Aubrey's sign?
Can I ask a question about that?
Certainly, go ahead.
And I guess my question is, are there things that we may find out about in the management plan that may impact the nature of the installation of the sign? Like, I saw things about geotechnical work and things like that. If the sign's really heavy, I don't know, does it need support that would need to be included? I don't know. If it's just putting up a regular sign and it's light and there's no implications, that's probably fine, but I don't know if someone can answer that now.
Through the chair, John Russell here, Deputy Director.
Yeah, so I was just going to suggest
Pardon for a
that
moment.
Russell might speak to that. Also present at the day that this was set up for us to take a look at. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Through the chair.
Yeah.
The supports for this sign are not too significant and could proceed without some of the geotechnical work. That is something that we would look at as we move forward with the sign. But our initial is that it could proceed before.
Thank you, John. I would suggest regarding geotechnical work, if you want to know what the soils are there, just wait a week or two and there'll be a burial 100 feet away in Hadley Park. You can go take a look. So I need some motions here. Jenny?
Can I just also ask another question before we make a motion? I'm afraid to say I don't know who Mr. Aubrey is or why he donated the sign. Is there any particular reason why he went ahead and made the sign to donate? Is there a larger story attached to that? I think in terms of the cemetery management plan, it's a question of whether this ties into a larger aesthetic for the cemeteries and whether there'll be more signage and whether this will kind of not tie in with anything additional that might be added in the future. I'm guessing that's the potential issue with putting the sign up now rather than waiting. So I just wondered why we would have had a sign created if there wasn't a plan to install it already.
Would anyone care to comment as to why we have a sign?
Thank you through the chair. So Mr. Aubrey's family has been in Colwood for many years. They have donated the cairn that's located at Pioneer Cemetery as well. Not too long ago, his mother-in-law that passed away, Dola Akers, who was a member of the Women's Institute, and she was also a member of Pioneer Cemetery, passed away. And this is his way of honoring Dola's memory. I believe, and I think that John Russell could clarify, but I believe that the wood that the sign was made from was milled from wood that was from Dola's property in Colwood that her family lived at for, I think they had it in their family for around 100 years or so at least.
Thank you. As near as I can see, the sign itself is slightly outside the present gates. If it goes in before the plan is completed, it is reversible, of course, so that it could go in, and if at future time we thought it would come out to be acceptable. Also, within the current boundaries of the cemetery, there are, I would almost call them interpretive monuments have been placed in the past by, it looks like, family members. I believe the Hardy family, I remember correctly, 2 stones there saying that a bit of the history of these 2 cemeteries. Both those monuments are there right now. So this is not untypical of small, and I'm going to say rural because that's what these were at the time, cemeteries. These were family oriented. People put in monuments that they desired rather than some civic standard that was set in a more formal case like we see in Ross Bay Cemetery. No, the signs are not untypical. I'm still looking for a motion.
Oh, well, I move that the motion as presented proceed to be seconded, so it can be voted.
Moved by Don Lovell, seconded, okay.
Can I just get some clarification on the motion? So the motion that was in the staff report was that staff return with an amendment to the 5-year financial plan for 2024 through 2028. to include funding in the amount of $115,000 to support the creation of a cemetery management plan, including the additional recommended scopes for both Pioneer and St. John the Baptist Heritage Church cemeteries, as outlined within the proposed scope provided by LeMay Heritage Consultants, and that the installation of the wooden signage donated by Mr. Aubrey be deferred until the sign can be considered in the context of the cemetery management plan. It sounded to me that you weren't making that part of the motion, but for some clarification, please.
No, I support the motion as presented. And I think it's important that it be able to go to council as per the proposed schedule.
Can I ask a procedural question?
Yes.
I'm just process-wise. So here's something I would say. There was the idea put out that perhaps we separate the two things being proposed, and we may accept the first one, and the second one about installation of signage, perhaps we don't recommend that it wait for the management plan. Perhaps we recommend that it happen earlier. Based on what I heard, I'd be comfortable with that proposal to change the installation timeline of the sign to happen as fast as could be possible. Do we have to defeat the existing motion before we amend it, or can we make an amendment now?
We actually don't have a seconder yet for the motion. Mr. Lovell did put the motion forward, but we don't have a seconder. If he would like to, he can split it and do it into two separate motions, or he could put it forward with the installation of the wooden signage, either or.
Well, I don't support installation of the sign before the plan is done. I don't know that that sign is necessarily appropriate given the stone and wrought iron materials that are there, but it might well be, but I think it needs other considerations that were raised by Jenny and others. I don't think speed is necessarily important at this point. And but if the motion is seconded, then you can do an amendment to the motion. So I would leave the motion as it is, as it was presented, and await someone to second it. Thanks.
I would like a seconder to the motion as recommended.
I'll second the motion, Jenny Seaman.
Jenny Seaman seconds the motion as recommended. Any comments to the motion? I call the motion. All in favor of the motion? Opposed, if any? One opposed? John, okay. Motion is carried. That calls for adjournment of the meeting.
So my question before adjournment is, when is the next meeting? The July meeting was canceled. Do we know when the next meeting would be?
September the 12th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much for attending. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.